This breeze, which has traveled from the regions towards which I am advancing, gives me a foretaste of those icy climes. Inspirited by this wind of promise, my daydreams become more fervent and vivid. Welcome to Bodybuilding with Victor Frankenstein. My name is Sophie Marie, and this is the podcast where I am trying to watch every single film adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Today, a dear friend of mine and I are going to be talking about the 2012 Frankenweenie, directed by Tim Burton. Now, before we hop on over to our special guest, I want to give a quick shout out to the podcast Jane Ostentations, hosted by Jessica Law and Sasha Sienna. That is where I definitely stole the concept for this show, so please hop on over to any of your pod chasers and give them a listen. Content warnings for today's episode include animal death, brief discussions of racism, and body horror. Young scientist Victor Frankenstein lives with his parents and his beloved bull terrier dog, Sparky, in the quiet town of New Holland. Victor's intelligence is recognized by his classmates at school, including his somber next-door neighbor, Elsa Van Helsing, the mischievous Edgar Igor, and the obese and gullible Bob, as well as the overconfident Toshiaki and the creepy Nasser, and finally an eccentric girl nicknamed the Weird Girl. Despite their admiration of him, he communicates little with them due to his relationship with his dog Sparky. Concerned with his son's isolation, Victor's father encourages him to take up baseball and make achievements outside of science. One day, Victor hits a home run at his first game. Sparky, seeing Victor's hit, runs away from the bleachers to pursue the ball, to which he is struck and killed by a car, leaving Victor traumatized. Inspired by his new science teacher, Mr. Riskruski's demonstration of the effect of electricity on dead frogs, Victor digs up Sparky, brings him to his makeshift laboratory in the attic, and successfully reanimates him with a bolt of lightning. Seeing Weird Girl's cat, Mr. Whiskers, the resurrected Sparky escapes from the attic and explores the neighborhood. He is recognized by Edgar, aka Igor, who blackmails Victor into teaching him how to raise the dead. Together, the two reanimate a dead goldfish, which turns invisible due to an error with the experiment. Edgar brags about the fish to his classmates, but when he tries to show it to a skeptical Nasser, it's gone, leading him to speculate that they can only last for a short time. In fear of losing the upcoming science fair, Toshiaki and Bob make a rocket out of soda bottles, which causes Bob to break his arm. Mr. Riskruski is blamed for the accident and fired. The gym teacher replaces him, but before Mr. Riskruski leaves town, he advises Victor to use science wisely. When Edgar is confronted by the other students on the baseball field at school, he accidentally reveals Victor's actions, inspiring them to try reanimation themselves. Victor's parents discover Sparky in the attic and are frightened, causing the dog to flee. While Victor and his parents search for Sparky, the classmates invade the lab, discovering Victor's reanimation formula. The classmates separately perform their experiments, which go awry and turn their own dead pets into monsters. Mr. Whiskers holds a dead bat while it is electrocuted, resulting in him becoming a monstrous, vampiric feline. Edgar turns a dead rat he found in the garbage into a were-rat. Nasser revives his mummified hamster Colossus. Toshiaki's turtle Shelley, which is a nod to Mary Shelley, is covered in Miracle Grow and turns into a Gamera-like monster, and Bob's sea monkeys grow into gremlin-like amphibious humanoids. The monsters break loose into the town fair where they wreak havoc. After finding Sparky at the town's pet cemetery, Victor sees the monsters heading to the fair and goes with his classmates to help deal with them. The sea monkeys explode after eating salt-covered popcorn, and Colossus is stepped on by Shelley, the giant turtle, while the rat and Shelley are returned to their original deceased forms after both are electrocuted. During the chaos, Persephone, Elsa's pet poodle, is grabbed by Mr. Whiskers and carried to the town windmill, with Elsa and Victor giving pursuit. The townsfolk blame Sparky for Elsa's disappearance and chase him to the windmill, which Elsa's uncle accidentally ignites with his torch. Victor and Sparky enter the burning windmill and rescue Elsa and Persephone, but Victor is trapped inside. Sparky rescues Victor, only to be dragged back inside by Mr. Whiskers, who is fatally impaled by a flying piece of wood during their confrontation before the windmill collapses on Sparky, killing him again. To reward him for his bravery and saving Victor, the townsfolk gather and revive Sparky with their car batteries. Persephone runs to Sparky and they kiss. Today we have our very first guest. Her name is Cassandra Taylor, and I'm going to turn it over to Cass to tell us who she is. Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Cass. I am a good friend and former classmate of Sophie's. I study and regularly write horror literature, specifically some horror literature kind of for kids and in general for like the creepy kids that are the same as the creepy kids that I was when I was growing up. And I love creepy kid literature and creepy kid movies. And Frankenstein. So,
all of those
am I qualified to speak? No. Am I going to? Yes.
Yes. Before we move on to Frankenweenie, what is your favorite creepy kid literature?
Oh, it's such a basic bitch answer, but I love me some Coraline.
It's okay.
I love it.
My answer to that is Graveyard Book. So
both Gaiman, both great. Yeah, I also loved the gory stories. Like, I don't know if you ever read them, but there was that picture book of, it was like learning the alphabet with a bunch of kids who died in different gruesome ways. And my grandfather was an artist, and he had a ton of those books. And I, like my grandmother would be like, don't look at those. And I'd be like, I'm going to look at them. I'm going to read them.
I mean, how many of us millennials also didn't grow up reading scary stories to tell in the dark? So.
Oh, absolutely. Goosebumps, too.
Goosebumps.
I feel like we were the tail end of the Goosebumps. Well, you're older than me, so you might not.
You.
I was tail end of the Goosebumps.
I was in the middle of the Goosebumps. So, like, I didn't actually watch the Goosebumps show until I was older. Like, I actually watched it in college. But I read the books. Growing up.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, honestly, the 90s and early 2000s was, like, prime time for creepy kid things. Like, even TV shows, like Courage the Cowardly Dog was the show.
Yeah. Also, those books, I don't know, the Bailey School kids I got really into, like Dracula Can't Drink Lemonade, shit like that, I lived for.
There was also the other series that was, the Teacher from the Black Lagoon series.
Oh, yeah. I loved those.
Yeah, those were really great. I think we were in the perfect time for weird kid stuff. And then everyone wonders why we're still into weird, creepy dark stuff. Shit. Yeah.
I know.
We also, coming back to Frankenweenie, were born into the Tim Burton Renaissance.
This is true. For all the goods and bads that gave us.
Yeah, I feel like we got the tail end of his good movies, or at least I got the tail end of like his really good movies. I think of Corpse Bride being his last like masterpiece.
That's fair.
That's and everything after that not all of it's bad. Some of it's bad.
Some of it's bad.
Not all of it is bad, but it's not the same level of like this is my shit.
I did have a moment recently, this past quarantine, where I caught all of Paranorman on television. Like, I didn't mean to watch it, it just came on, and I was like, okay. And at the end, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen that, the older sister is trying to get with this jock the whole time, and he's like, you should come over and watch chick flicks. And she's like, oh my god, I'd love to. And he's like, me and my boyfriend love to watch chick flicks. And for a minute I had that like, yes, the gays! And then I was like, oh no. You used it as that gag again that I don't love.
I don't know what you're talking about. All of us queers enjoy being the joke.
The joke.
The only joke. Straight people have two whole jokes about queer people.
And it's that they're queer and then
and that's hilarious. That's
so funny.
Too funny. So, on to Frankenweenie. This is a weird movie.
It's a weird movie. Yeah, it's a remake, first of all. It was an 80s movie that was a live action.
Yeah. I am really bad. I haven't seen the 1984 version yet. It's on my list.
Either.
There are so many movies on this list. It will be covered eventually. But Shelley Duvall is in the original, which is amazing. I love Shelley Duvall. Rip. She's not dead, but she needs help.
Yeah, it's also it was also directed by Tim Burton, the 1984 version. It was a featurette directed by Tim Burton.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, produced
that
by
feels...
Disney.
So they're both
he
produced
got
by Disney.
fired for it.
That's really... Did he get fired for the original or for the remake?
The original. So he was, as according to the Wikipedia, and I'm sure somebody out there is going to get pissed that we're reading the Wikipedia, but shut up, it's free. So it says that the controversy around this was Burton was fired by Disney after the original 1984 film was completed. 1984 film was completed as the studio claimed that he had been wasting company resources and felt the film was not suitable for the targeted young audience. Again, I haven't seen it, so I don't know if that's true or not, but I will watch anything with Shelley Duvall and love it. So, you know.
So my first sort of question is, first question. Have you read Frankenstein?
Yes, I have read Frankenstein.
Awesome. I feel like I should have asked that beforehand. But as someone who's read Frankenstein, what are your sort of first thoughts when we just recently rewatched this? So what are your first thoughts when thinking about the novel?
Well, okay, so one of the things that's really, has always stuck in my mind with Frankenstein the novel is it's very clear that throughout the novel, Frankenstein does not love his monster.
Yes.
And Frankenstein never has. He doesn't know the person who's died. He brings him back with alchemy. It's a whole big thing. And the creature comes back, and all of a sudden, Victor Frankenstein has to clean up the baking soda volcano that's gotten on his floor, and he's like, oh shit, I'm allergic to baking soda. But it's not baking soda, it's a person. And I think that Frankenweenie, for the fact that it is a kid's film, and I recognize that, I think answers the time-old question that I always had of what would happen if Victor Frankenstein loved his monster both before he was dead and after?
Yeah, I think something about the novel, and this is going to come up a little bit more in a short series that I'm working on right now, because I feel like this is really honed in that show, is that Victor Frankenstein's motives in the book are purely selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. he's not doing it. He thinks he's doing it for the greater good and for science, but it's very much like an ego trip, and it's something that he thinks he is the only one who understands, the philosophy of human life deep enough to be able to do this. Whereas,
which is so funny, considering that Shelley wrote it when she was with, her husband and Lord Byron, who are also writing horrors. And I'm sure we're sitting in that castle being like, I, as this white man, know the epitome of how to write horror and the epitome of how to write poetry. And Mary Shelley was like, okay, hold my quill.
Well, it's really interesting when you compare it to Shelley and Byron's poetry, because there's a lot of Enlightenment ideas woven through romantic poetry, basically about not necessarily God is dead, but man is reaching the level of God and is able to create beautiful things. And Mary Shelley is like, no. to do that is beyond hubristic. It's quite literally mythologically bad.
Yeah.
And not even necessarily in a moral way. I know that the novel itself was pretty widely banned in England after publication for it being blasphemous. But the point isn't that Victor, yes, he succeeds in creating life, but it's not in the way that God does in the novel. It's very much seen as being... Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And it's not necessarily because it's against God, but because it's harmful to the monster. The monster has no agency while desperately trying to have agency. And I think that's a lot more of where the horror comes from for me, having read it, is the monster's journey much more than the things that the monster does to Victor's family and him.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas this, Frankenweenie is very much just like every kid who's ever lost a pet, just wanting your pet back. And something that I really love is once Sparky is like brought back and he's falling apart because he's a rotting corpse, is Victor just like, oh, I'll fix that. I'll sew your tail back on.
No worries.
There's no
They never address it either.
No.
At no point are they like, this dog's gonna rot from the inside out. Like, never.
This is not a prolonged investment.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think it's really sweet that he's not like, well, I could go get another living dog. It's very much like the preservation of this creature that I love and then I've put all of my time and energy into. Also, Sparky is freaking adorable.
Oh, he's so cute. His little ham hocks when he trots around. He's the cutest.
Oh my god, he's like, the thing is, I have a fat, round, small dog, and he's animated like a fat, round, small dog, and I love that.
It's true. All the animals in that are really cute, except the cat with its stupid little, like, raw frog foot. Blech. Anyway. And I'm a cat person, normally, so I don't like to shit on animated cats, but, like, didn't like that one.
Love the bat cat in the end. You know I love
I know you do, and it so deeply disturbed. We were watching it, and I, like, the minute it came on screen, I was like, Sophie, that is the kind of animal that you would see in the wild, and you'd be like, I'm gonna take that home.
And you are correct.
Yeah.
I do think that there's something interesting in regards to I'm trying to think of how to word this. The thoughts about science in general is Frankenweenie, whereas the novel really says, like, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Frankenweenie is like, you can do it if you have the right motivation behind it.
Right.
Which I think is a really interesting diversion from the typical Frankenstein, like, scientific ideology, is that science itself is not demonized.
Right.
The only character who's sort of seen as not backwards in the adults is the science teacher, who looks weirdly like Vincent Price if Vincent Price had been, like, squashed.
Caught between two revolving doors and spun around a little.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I hated watching that character's mouth move.
Oh, it's not fun. It's because I know exactly what they did, is they made a perfectly normal face, and then they took the cheeks and shoved him up to where the nose is, and then called it a day. And, like, that's cool, you made a cool-looking character, but it's not a cool-looking character I like.
It's not something I enjoy looking at. Honestly, I feel like most of the body horror in this film is just the way that everyone is animated.
Except the gym teacher. That lady is Pixar mom level thick.
What an incredible description, and you're not wrong.
Stacked, double-cheeked up on a Tuesday night. She is, like, so thick, dude. It's... like, as an adult, it's uncomfortable how voluptuous the gym teacher is. And they have her, like, climb a pole and spin around. Like, okay, all right, Tim Burton.
He knows what the adults in the room are after. Yeah, she's literally, like, the only character who's not borderline horrifying to look at. But that's also something that Tim Burton does really well. Like, I have to say, Tim Burton's human proportions are always disconcerting. Like, he uses the uncanny in a way that I'm terrified of animation. Everyone who's ever met me knows that, like, animated television shows are the bane of my existence. They give me the absolute heebie-jeebies in a way that I, like, quite can't play. Like, I can't quite place why. But I do love Tim Burton, and I love Tim Burton because it's enough unease looking at his characters, but not quite to the point where I want to, like, stab my eyes out. Whereas I definitely feel like there's moments in Frankenweenie where I'm like, oh god,
yeah,
like, that's too far.
You. Oh my god, the tiny mummified hamster and its one little hand that it claws itself around on. Colossus, and then gets stepped on.
I do have to say, really quickly, I know we'll talk about some of the coding a little bit later.
Oh.
But, because it's a big oof.
Oh, yeah.
The use of other animals, I think, is really fun.
Yeah.
I think, well, one, it ties back into all of the other students don't use science for noble purposes, which I do think begs the question, like, what is a noble purpose? Victor's still selfish. He's still only doing this thing for himself, but he's also, like, 12.
Oh, yeah, he is. I think they are all actually... I know the character that I looked up earlier that we were discussing and we'll talk about later is confirmed 12, and I think they're all 12, and, like, I didn't even know multiplication when I was 12. How the hell is this tiny twink bringing a dog back to life?
Well, yeah. Like, I think that there's definitely an interesting element where his motive is less hubris-based, but it's just as selfish. And because he's a kid, you can't really fault him. But then you fault the other students quite easily.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. But I also kind of want to talk about what kinds of animals are picked for each student. I don't have any specific thoughts on it, but I do think it's interesting that the only two, like the girls, one has a cat and one has a poodle.
Yeah.
Those feel very gendered.
Yeah. Also, Edgar, who is the creepy kid with the fingers, like, he's the creepiest animated child in existence.
If anyone is a millennial and has seen Salad Fingers, they are basically the same. It's truly heinous. Yeah, he's horrible to look at.
He is, but he also gets a fish, which I feel like is the least, and I love fish. I'm not saying this to, like, hate on fish lovers, but it's, like, the least pet you can have. Because it's a fish, right? Everybody says all you can do is look at it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that it's such an interesting dynamic that the first creature that's brought back to life is a creature that, like, we as the audience know and love and are rooting for. And the second animal we don't ever see alive.
No,
like,
we
he picks out a dead fish from the fish store, and then it comes back as invisible and disappear. They never explain what happens. Does it die? Does it fizzle away? Like, it's never explained.
Literally, all they say is that it was made for the wrong reason, so, like, it didn't last.
Yeah, and it didn't live. But I do think that it's very interesting that, like, nobody else gets a really kind of cuddly, sweet creature except the, like, morally good characters, which is the Elsa Van Helsing, his love interest, and Victor, who have the two dogs, and the rest are kind of either, like, played for laughs or genuinely terrifying. Like, the sea monkeys, horrifying. The rat thing, disgusting. Like...
Oh, yeah. I mean, first off, I do want to point out that Edgar gets, he doesn't get animals that he's connected to at all. He gets the dead fish and then a dead rat out of the trash.
Yeah.
First off, fish are also slimy. And that, like, I'm not going to lie, the fact that so much of the fish is used as, like, oh, here, touch my invisible fish. Like, I felt very viscerally, like, there was a lot of tactile elements to his animals in a weird way.
And the dead rat looks nasty.
It looks nasty, and it really, I think, compliments both in a good and bad way how gross Edgar is animated, because he's animated in, like, he's got weird teeth, his hair is, like, kind of greasy, he's got the weird long fingers. Yeah, it's absolutely bonkers. And then the other two characters get a turtle. Who's just a shell, who's just like a dead shell.
Yeah.
And then Colossus the hamster, which hamsters are cute, but he's also wrapped up like a mummy.
Yeah, and the sea monkeys, too.
Oh, and the sea monkeys.
Which, this is something that's really interesting to me, because all of the characters who are considered bad are in some way uncomfortably presented, right? So the girl who's portrayed as bad isn't entirely... like, she's just blonde and creepy, and I'm all for blonde and creepy. Like, I agree, there are a ton of blonde creepy kids. I don't mind her at all. I do think that there's something very interesting that it says about the portrayal and acceptance of femininity, because her room, when you see it, is, like, pink and princesses, and her cat is this, like, very fluffy, white, smushed-faced, Persian-presenting cat, and I feel like every time we look at super girly women... it's this idea of, like, oh, she's, like, weird and creepy, and, like, I think it's the same thing that we do nowadays with, like, horse girls. When there's a 12-year-old who's obsessed with horses, and everyone's like, that's gross, because you're a girl, and girls like horses. And, like, fuck that, dude. Horses are terrifying. If you can get on a horse as a 12-year-old, you are a badder woman than I. And not, like badass. Which is super interesting. And then, the other characters whose names I don't know, and I feel bad about that, but you have... the one who has the gerbil looks very much like the classic Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, he looks like the oh my god, the James Whale version from the 1930s.
Yeah, very much. And great callback to the original. Whatever. He's got a creepy voice. Don't super care. His animal's really interesting to me because it's played for a laugh, right? Like, oh, Colossus. It's buried in a mausoleum too.
Yeah,
it has its own
hamster.
fucking mausoleum. Which I think is really interesting because throughout the film, that character, as many of them do, but especially that one, presents as this, like, better than you, holier than thou, like, very big ego kind of character. And I do think it's very interesting that in everything in his life, like, even though he has the smallest animal, that's the most useless when it comes back, it's buried in the biggest place, it has the biggest name, we get the biggest lead up for it. And then the other kid, who's portrayed as not great, is the assistant, who is, like, drawn and animated to be your, like, classic fat kid, right?
Yeah, there is something I'm going to point out really quick, and we're going to discuss more, is that every single child character that is the villain, quote-unquote, of the movie, fall into typical horror villain tropes. You get... monstrous femme with weird girl. But then we get fat kid, disabled kid, because Edgar has a hunchback like Igor. And then Nasser is just kind of big and creepy. But then we also have the only child of color in the entire film. So it's just like every single, like, not great villain trope is just thrown onto an individual child. Kind of, in a way that to me does feel quite, at best careless, at worst very much on purpose.
Oh, yeah. And that's my point with the animals, too, and it's something that I find very, very interesting, is the fat kid and the disabled kid never have animals that they are shown to have loved or loved them. Because the fat kid has a packet of sea monkeys that he throws in a pool, and Edgar, who is, like, the disabled cast kid, gets 2 dead animals that we never see alive. And he has no connection to. And I think that, like, you cannot overlook that as an oopsie choice. Like, everybody else had something, a turtle you love. Maybe it doesn't love you back, but you love it. And I mean, I don't want to get into what animals love you back, but, like, everybody else had pets, right? And whether or not they brought their pets back for the reason that they loved them and missed them, they at least had pets. And I think it's really interesting that the 2 kids that never had something that they were shown to love and love them back are the fat kid and the disabled kid.
Oh, 100%. There was something else I was going to say specifically. Something that I mentioned while we were chatting last week when we rewatched it was that as much as I don't agree with this statement I'm about to make, people do make the statement that sometimes you can cast people and then forget, oh, they fall into this trope. Like, you forget why you're troping them that way. I don't agree with that because casting is much more deliberate, but people can and have made that argument. With animation, that argument goes right out the window because you have chosen literally every single frame how to generate this person and code this person, which is, I think, makes the idea of, like, oops, all these kids are really harmful horror tropes, like, really implausible.
Oh, yeah.
Especially
absolutely.
Given, first off, I mean, the only 2 kids who are seen as being anywhere moral are Victor, who is, the, white, he's the white kid, and Elsa, who also doesn't have a personality other than she's kind of goth.
Yeah.
And played by Winona Ryder.
Right. Oh, is she really?
Yeah.
Is she voiced by Winona Ryder?
She's voiced by Winona Ryder, and she has a very similar hairstyle to what's her face from Beetlejuice.
Oh, yeah, from Lydia Deetz.
Lydia, thank you. I wanted to call her Wednesday,
who's
but
also
I was like,
played by Winona Ryder.
Yeah,
Super
exactly.
Interesting. I hadn't picked up on that. Yeah, and she also has this, like, little goth poodle. Like, it's a little black poodle, but it still has the classic poodle haircut, and I think it's really interesting that the two... Like, I don't know, man. Gives the girl a snake. I know then you can't have the cute little love story between the two dogs, but, like, A, we don't need to see dogs fall in love, although it is really cute because there is a scene where she gets shocked and the poodle gets the two little white, like, streaks in her hair that the Bride of Frankenstein traditionally has, and it's really cute. It's, like, a really cute cast right there, and I totally get it, but also, like, give the girl a snake!
Why can't Sparky fall in love with a snake?
Yeah. It's dog. Like, what? Someone was gonna be like, oh, that's wrong? Like, I'm like, I'm sorry.
You know they would. Straight parents are weird.
And, I know. And, like, I don't know, man. It's just one of those things that, like, again, you can't... You made this movie literally from scratch.
Yeah.
Like, it's claymation.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, like, there's no way... You like, you... And it does such a weird thing to me, too, for the bodies, because, like, you decided exactly what this body was going to look like, and exactly what the person who inhabited it was, and it's never good.
No.
Like, Victor is so normal looking, and Elsa is so normal looking, and even in Tim Burton's weird way of making people, their family... Oh, the other person who's coded super bad is Elsa's uncle, the Burgermeister, who is also... portrayed as, like, this, like, bald, fat, old man with glasses. And, like...
Yeah,
but
it's one of
in that weird way, he's so weird about families because the whole Frankenstein family looks the same. They're three people with different clothes and different hairstyles. And Elsa is, like, shown to be very... attractive, so the person, like the older male who she's living with, can't be her father because he's too ugly, so he's her uncle. And, like, what?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of discussion around, specifically, like, princess films and how they have, unrealistic expectations. I do think there's something to be said for other children's films, giving into tropes that are, because all of the tropes that we're discussing are very prevalent, specifically in Frankenstein adaptations. I'm planning on doing a much larger deep dive into the fact that disability in Frankenstein adaptations is absolutely abhorrent. And most of that comes from Igor characters. But this is a kid's movie that is still, like, reinforcing those tropes in a way that is uncritical of those tropes. Which I do think is really important to bring up. Like, I don't necessarily think it's a film to just disregard. I think it's an interesting film. Same with, like, princess films. But I think that there should be a larger discussion around how tropes begin in media and how people start engaging with tropes in media. Because this is a film geared at, you know, I would say elementary or middle schoolers. Maybe elementary. I don't know what kids are watching.
I feel like late elementary, early middle school.
Definitely.
Yeah. But, like, and this is the other thing that I was thinking while you were talking, is the other thing that really gets me about this is Igor's character is also really coded as poor. Because his clothes are super ripped, his hair is really greasy, and we never see his, like, nice suburban home, and he pulls rats out of the trash and buys dead fish. And, like, I hate the trope of, like, the poor disabled kid is trying to work their way up in the world by being manipulative and creepy. Because, like, I don't know, man.
Oh, yeah.
I was a poor disabled kid. Like, as much as I would love to look at Elsa Van Helsing and be like, that was me as a kid, like, the only thing that was me as a kid is the hairstyle. Maybe. And, like, as an adult watching that, you're like, I am so much closer. Like, I grew up in the suburbs, right, and I went to a very rich high school, and I definitely saw myself in a lot of ways as, like, that poor kid, right? Yeah. And I feel like I look at Edgar, and I'm like, yeah, that's the poor kid.
Oh, yeah.
Well, like, none of the poor kids I ever knew were like that, like...
No.
So why are his fingers so creepy? Jesus!
Why are his fingers? I love that you're just so latched onto his creepy
I'm
fingers.
so latched onto the fingers.
There's also
They're so bad.
Also, I think it's really important to one, I think Edgar and is his name Bob? I don't remember. The chubby kid are also coded as being kind of stupid. They're not, out of everyone, like all of the other ones are kind of like Igor tries to be manipulative and isn't very good at it. Everyone else is either good at being manipulative or is smart, like is told to be smart, whereas the disabled and the fat kid are like kind of just blubbering idiots.
Yeah, I just checked the wiki for Bob right now, and the description literally says and reads, Bob is a mama's boy, the brawn to Toshiaki's brains. Sorry if I butchered that. He is never mean-spirited, but he's easily led and gullible. Bob follows Toshiaki everywhere, but is the first one to run to Victor for help when he gets in over his head. So not only is he portrayed as stupid, he's also portrayed as cowardly and a mama's boy.
Yeah.
Which, like, bleh.
And then also to round back to the reason that we're having this whole discussion is Toshiaki is like aggressively stereotypical from the moment that we meet him until the end. Also, wanting to give a disclaimer, Tim Burton has gone on record more than once with some pretty racist views. Like, he is not a director who I think we can have a lot of faith in regards to his representation of people of color. Cass and I, both white, and it's so apparent in this movie that even, like, just sitting there as two white people, we can go, oh my god, that's like every stereotype just thrown onto this one kid. He's like, he's shown as being, if not as smart as Victor, like almost, but like never has pure motives. Like, he's not in it for like the love of science or because he loves this animal. He's in it because he wants to win. And he's really leading the pack of these weird, creepy kids who are manipulating their way and stealing Victor's work. He like, I really just think that every single villain kid, and he's really like the pinnacle of that. It's like, if you watch that film and can't recognize the tropes that they're leaning on, I don't think you've ever watched a film before.
Interestingly enough, sorry, I was listening to you, but I was also double checking the wiki on him, because I think the way that all the characters are described, even online, is like so telling. But apparently, and I don't know if any of this is true, I just stumbled onto it in a random fandom website, but apparently, and this is as of April 23rd, 2019, I guess he didn't. There was, like, talk a while back that there was supposed to be, or might have been, a Frankenweenie television show where Toshiaki was going to be the prime villain, right?
Of course.
And, because it says in the description of him, he delights in beating Toshiaki is overachieving and mega competitive. He is 12 years old, he delights in beating Victor at his own game, and like a power-hungry mad scientist, Toshiaki will stop at nothing to win the top prize in the school's science fair, even if it means stealing Victor's ideas to do it. Which, like, Jesus H. Christ. Also, his inspirations were various child characters in Godzilla and Gamera films, general form, and then the Night Porter from David Lynch's The Elephant Man in personality.
Interesting. I don't know much about The Elephant Man. I haven't seen it. Sin. Yeah. I've seen Godzilla films, which I'm not gonna have us go into American co-opting of kaiju films, because that is an entire episode. That's an entire series in and of itself.
That's a week all its own.
But fundamentally, I mean, my hot take about American kaiju films is that we co-opted the big scary monsters and the fact that they are existentially quite terrifying in similar veins to cosmic horror, but we have like no understanding of like why they were created. And why they were so prevalent in specifically Japanese media. Like, that's just not a part of our versions of them. I would love to do an entire show just talking about Americans remaking Japanese horror. Because we do it kind of a lot. So I don't have a firm stance on like using those characters as inspiration for this character, but it does feel weirdly like I'm trying to think of what's the word. I'm not targeted, but it's so specific, especially given the fact that I can't really think of another character of color in a Tim Burton film, which there's a reason for that. Tim Burton has said that he won't animate people of color.
They don't fit his aesthetic.
Yeah. So, like we said, dude's a racist.
The only character of color that I know of that I checked actively is the villain in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, who's played by, I think, Samuel L. Jackson, which is incredible.
Let me just
but also
double check.
Deeply problematic.
Because I have not seen that film. Yep, it is Sam Jackson.
I haven't either. Yeah, and he's the only character of color, and he's the villain.
Yeah,
and it's really interesting to me that people of color fit Tim Burton's aesthetic when they're doing something wrong. Oy.
Yeah, so I like I said, I don't have a firm stance on him using children from kaiju movies, like, specifically, because I don't have enough knowledge of how those children function in those films, but I don't trust Tim Burton as far as I can throw him in regards to representation of really anyone who isn't, like, a straight white person. Hot take. And the thing is, like, I love Tim Burton's films, and I still think that this is something that should be more talked about, because I personally don't see it talked about outside of, like, the horror community.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, a shame, to say the absolute least.
It's messy, my dude.
It is messy. Yeah, so
Big time messy.
I'm trying to think of what I had another specific question, and it has left my brain.
I will just say real fast, fun fact, that the science teacher in Frankenweenie is voiced by Martin Landau.
I don't know who that is.
He played Bela Lugosi in the 1994 Touchstone film Ed Wood.
Oh, okay.
So just like a quick tie-in to the horror community. It's not Bela Lugosi, but it's somebody who played Bela Lugosi.
I do have to say that this film has a lot of nods to specifically early horror. There is actually a scene where the parents, Victor's parents, are sitting on the couch watching a Christopher Lee Dracula movie, which is really fun. It's the only thing that's not, like, animated in the traditional Tim Burton style. We have reference to Godzilla. We have reference to the James Whale Frankenstein.
Yeah, and Van Helsing is
which
Dracula
is a character
name.
From Dracula.
Yep.
And then we also have, what was it? Oh, we have the Vincent Price weird science teacher. So there's a lot of reference. Oh, also in the big climactic battle scene between all the animals, Nasser is, like, wrapped up like a mummy and shoved into a fake sarcophagus.
Yeah, and
at
his
the fair.
his gerbil, pardon me, is also gerbil, hamster, guinea pig. Do we ever know? Vague rodent. Is also
rodent.
is also wrapped up like a mummy and comes out of, like, a tube.
Yeah.
Which I think. Also the whole. I mentioned this at the beginning, but they have a whole like graveyard just for pets, which is very reminiscent to me of Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
I don't think on purpose, because it's a kids movie, and of course people would have a really elaborate cemetery for their pets. But as a massive Stephen King fan, it clicked something in my brain.
Yeah, I think that this movie definitely understands that it is not just a kids movie that is sharing, like, a name with a horror character. It is an adaptation of Frankenstein, which I think is really interesting. I think that there are actual versions, like, quote unquote adult adaptations of Frankenstein that are even further from like, understanding the source material.
Victor Frankenstein.
Cassandra Taylor agrees that Victor Frankenstein is a horrible movie and no one should watch it.
They lost me at the homoerotic cyst sucking. I say it every time, but they lost me there.
It's truly, like, it's a scene that haunts me every time I think about it. I gag.
Yep. It's bad, man.
It's really bad. But on that point, I think we should rate this movie.
I love it. I'm ready.
I'm gonna let you choose the number on the scale and why.
Okay.
Because you're my special guest. So, and this is out of a rating scale of 10.
Okay.
And the first rate is adherence to the plot of the book.
That's like a 2, man.
That's like a 2.
That doesn't stick. First of all, something dies. Nothing dies in Frankenstein. Well, a lot of things die in the original Frankenstein, but we never meet the alive monster. Second of all, the only thing that Victor Frankenstein shares with Victor Frankenstein is that they have the same name. He's not a doctor.
Neither of them are doctors.
It's like a 2. Like, it shares a name and they bring something back. It's also really interesting because I always think electricity when I think about Frankenstein, but no, in the novel she brings him, Mary Shelley has Victor Frankenstein bring him back with alchemy. Sometimes I feel bad by being like, it's not good to the source material if they bring him back with electricity, because everybody brings everybody back with electricity, but like, if we're going for the literary points, and I'm a lit major, like, gotta stick up for it there. Yeah, it's like a 2, man. It doesn't stick very close, but I do think, in its defense, I love how you're like, give me a number, and I'm giving you a paragraph, but...
That's perfect.
In its defense, I think it takes the concept of bringing something back from the dead in this scientific way to a place that is really interesting if you look at it in conjunction with Victor Frankenstein's original motives in the novel versus this Victor Frankenstein's motives in the film.
I firmly agree. And that kind of jumps into the next one, which is not adherence, but like an understanding of the themes of the book.
It's tricky because I feel like they have an understanding of what the themes aren't. Right? Yeah. Because I think that they have a very firm understanding of, like, bringing something back out of love is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if they have a full understanding of, like, because they get into it with all the other kids, right? That, like, bringing something back for your own selfish purposes will come back to hurt you, but I haven't given you a number yet. I'm going to give it a solid 5. I'm going to go right down the middle.
Yeah, like, I definitely feel like this version has a better understanding of what the themes of the novel is, but I do think there's a concerted effort to not have those be the themes of the film.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like something like Victor Frankenstein from 2015 really has no idea what it's doing.
Fucking... They wanted to queerbait us with Daniel Radcliffe and James McAvoy, and, like, did I watch it for that reason? Yeah. Did I like it? No.
No. God, it's awful. Next one is characters from the book.
Oy, there's... No. They're not. That's like a 1, dude. I don't see any of the characters. I guess the only thing that I could say, and it's not even really from the book, but Elsa is similar enough to, is it Elizabeth?
Elizabeth.
From the book, because they don't do anything but worry about Victor.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, I'll give them a 1. Their names both start with E. Boom. Right there.
Perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
The next 2, I think, are a little bit easier because they're just based on your own personal opinion. Do you find this movie enjoyable?
I do. I will give it I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 on enjoyable, because if you can overlook the glaring, awful representation of anybody who's not white, cis, and creepy, it's a cute story. It's a cute story about somebody that I can relate to, because I was also that creepy kid that lost a pet and wanted them back desperately. And And I understand that, and I think they do a really good job of that relationship and portraying that. So for that, I will give it a 6 out of 10. But, like, it's a hard movie to sit through without going, ah!
Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies where, as a kid, loved it. As an adult who spent most of my life in media analysis, it's tough. It's tough. Which kind of leads into the last question, which I think is a little bit more nuanced of a question. It's, would you recommend it?
If you're an art student, 10 out of 10, watch it, because there's some great claymation in it.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're watching it with your kids, or you, like, have a kid that really likes kind of creepy media, yeah, I'd say definitely watch it with them. But I think that, like, it's a movie that requires a conversation in ways that other Tim Burton movies maybe don't. Like, Corpse Bride, great movie, maybe a little problematic, but you don't have to, I feel like, sit down with your kids and be like, people who look like Igor or look like Tom are not bad people.
Yeah.
And,
I feel very similar to, I was talking to a friend specifically about Victor Frankenstein, and I said that the only reason I would ever tell someone to watch that movie is if they had questions on how coding works in cinematic language.
Fair.
Because that is a movie where that coding is not subtext, like it is quite literally just text. And it's really easy to parse out, like, how that coding goes viciously wrong. I feel like this is a movie where it's not as easy as something like Victor Frankenstein for people who might not understand, like, the coding of cinematic language, which I think also makes it a little bit more insidious. So I definitely think that, especially with someone like a kid who's really into, you know, like you said, something creepy or horror, or animation, watching them and then having not only the conversation of, like, you know, kids like this aren't inherently evil, but also, like, maybe ask them why in that, like, if they're watching the movie, like, why do you feel like these kids are villains? And then have a conversation about, like, I don't want to be like, teach your kids media literacy and sound really bougie, but also teach your kids media literacy.
The literary. Yeah. And that's so important, because I had to have, you know, sit down conversations with friends and other people where I was like, hey, dude, sometimes, like, the poor kid stories that you view as underdog stories, like, aren't really cool.
Oh, like, yeah. I mean, I feel like the biggest learning experiences I've ever had in regards to media literacy is, like, taking a thing that I love and then, like, reading why someone dislikes it and going, okay, my knee-jerk reaction is to not agree with that. Why?
Yeah.
And I think that
absolutely.
I feel like Frankenweenie is a really great way to do that with a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, though, I will say, like, the dogs are really cute. The dogs are really cutely, like, animated and done. And there are bits in it that are, like, funny and kind of ridiculous. Like, they kill a bunch of sea monkeys with popcorn. And I think that's so fun as a little kid to be like, that's a cool little science thing. They're freshwater sea monkeys. They can't handle salt. We kill them with popcorn. Nothing wrong there. Everything else is wrong. Like...
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. Also, like, I would love... The issue is, I love the idea of the story so much. Because I think it's so important to let kids know that, like, it really sucks when your pet dies. And, like, nothing is ever going to be the same as having them back. And that's...
Yeah.
Like, I think that most kids' first experience with death, I know mine is losing a pet. And movies about losing pets, I think, are really, really important to, like, watch with kids and to have with kids, but there are better ways to do it. I wish this would get a third remake, honestly. Like, I would love to see this done.
Maybe by someone who isn't Tim Burton.
Who isn't Tim Burton.
Both versions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
to see, like, oh no, I'm forgetting his name. Oh my god. He directed Jojo Rabbit and also
Taika Waititi.
Yes, would love to see a Taika Waititi Frankenweenie. Would love that more than anything.
So another horror sin is I haven't watched either version of What We Do in the Shadows yet.
Sophie, I watched the documentary for the first time with my older sibling, their roommate, and their roommate's boyfriend, and my boyfriend, and we were all just sitting on a couch, and with such severe social anxiety, I was sitting in a room with two people I didn't know, and also my boyfriend. I was like, oh my god, and I seriously almost peed myself on the couch watching the movie. It's so fucking funny. I will not spoil anything else for you, but there's a line in it where somebody says, I would feel better eating a sandwich if I knew nobody had fucked it first. And Sophie, I cannot. I cannot.
Wow, that's really hilarious. I do have to say before we go, I think Taika Waititi is a great director because he does, at least with quote unquote adult cinema, he does a really good job of tackling taboo subjects with humor, and not humor in like I'm making fun of the situation, but I am dealing with the situation. And I think that is something, especially having like Jojo Rabbit, I think is a really, really good example of that. Is that the whole concept of the film is horrific, and he finds a way to make it, I don't want to say joyful, but like, I don't know how to describe it, but
I know, but childlike.
Like
realistic
clearly,
to what childhood is.
Yeah, like you're seeing these horrible actions through the eyes of a child, and that child's being questioned.
Yeah, I also love that when he was making that movie, somebody asked him, they were like, what research did you do to play Hitler? And he was like, none, fuck that guy, I don't care. Like I'm not gonna do any research to try and be like Hitler. Nobody wants to be like Hitler. Seriously, fuck that guy. I'm gonna play him with the least amount of respect that I can and love it. And because I'm so tired of people being like, I know that this was a super problematic historical figure, but like, I wanted to get in his head and get it right. Because like, bitch, no you don't. No, he's a bad historical person for a fucking reason, dude.
No.
People were like, I really wanted to understand Ted Bundy. Like, why?
Why?
I don't want to understand that. No one does. And I love that he had the guts to be like, I don't want to know anything of what he was actually like. I'm going to disrespect the hell out of him because that's what he deserves. Yeah, and I really want that freshness and that take to come to a lot of these stories that I feel like are really sweet and really great, but also like done really badly by Tim fucking Burton.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna stop recording now.
I'm gonna call it. I love it. I'll call it too.
Thank you, Cass, for being here, and
thank you for having me. Never again, I'm sure.
In her lifetime, Mary Shelley gave birth to 4 children, 3 of which passed away. Her only surviving child, Percy Florence Shelley, was actually born after her husband died. To keep up with me, go to Das Beast Performance Project at Instagram.com, or you can support the podcast and all of my other work at Das Beast Performance at Patreon.com. Quick shout out to my $10 and up patrons. Their names are Jamari Littlejohn, Carrie Morrison, Lois Gallagher, Susie Wilhoft, Joella Oldfield, and Mike Nevin. This episode was by me, Sophie Marie, with guest star Cassandra Taylor, and edited by Otto Schatz. Bodybuilding with Victor Frankenstein is distributed by Buzzsprout.com.